treats, I guess.
Ryan McCaffrey with IGN. We
Oh
are
my
at
God.
Valve Software talking Half-Life. Alyx,
Is this
got
gaming
Gabe Newell,
Jesus?
the co-founder of Valve, along with Robin Walker,
Why is he
programmer,
chilling so
designer
hard?
on Alyx. Gabe, what's your reaction when the team comes to you and says, "We're working on a
And
new
why is he
Half-Life game"?
It's sort of like,
twice the
line
size
in
of
John
them
Wick, where
combined?
everybody keeps asking me if I'm back, and it's like, yeah, I guess Half-Life's back. So it's great. It's a huge amount of fun. It's great to work in Half-Life universe again, and it's, for us, it symbolizes, that we've identified a set of fundamentally interesting challenges in game design, and there's an opportunity to go and do something. So Half-Life's our crowbar that we pull out when we want to tackle those.
Were you
I
surprised?
can't fucking
at all
hear him. Does he not have a
VR
microphone?
No. Well, once people play the game, I think they'll understand why we think that all of the things that have traditionally been associated with Half-Life in terms of this single-player immersive experience is why VR gives us a huge opportunity to improve that. So the proof is really going to be when people play the game. I think they'll say, oh, okay, this makes a lot of sense. Because for us, this is really a statement about everything we've learned, everything that we were trying to do to move this kind of game forward. And VR enables that in ways that I think will be obvious to people when they play.
Yeah. Robin, were you nervous at all letting him know the first time that the project had kicked up?
I wasn't nervous about Gabe at all. I was nervous about our fans.
Yeah.
I think announcing the next Half-Life game was obviously something we worried about a bunch. And I think we just kept telling ourselves, as long as it's good, everyone will be happy. And hopefully that worked out.
So I've worked on all of, from the beginning,
from day one, yeah.
right? And but for people who are new to the Alyx team, they're kind of terrified because they have to live up to all of these expectations.
Sure.
Like, some of them got into the industry because they played, one of the Half-Life games. So they're pretty stressed out. I'm super happy. I couldn't be more excited by what we put together, and now I can't wait to hear what people have to say. By the way, my email is gaben@valvesoftware.com. So please let me know after you have a chance to play the game what you think.
Are there any little Gabe Easter eggs in there, or things that you wanted or suggested?
I'm not going to give up the Easter eggs yet.
Fair enough. After 20-something years, Gabe, what is a typical day for you like?
If it's a typical day, that means that it's predictable, and I try to avoid. Usually, I try to solve problems that aren't super obvious. I do spend a lot of time on email, but I try to avoid having a role that just requires me turning a crank on something.
Right.
So, personally, the area I'm spending a lot of time on has been growing out of a bunch of research that occurred a while ago in brain-computer interfaces, and I think that that's kind of long lead stuff. So that's kind of the background thread that I get pulled back into when other things aren't demanding my attention.
So is it kind of just a mix of game stuff, business side stuff, Steam? Kind of
personnel issues, thinking about how to communicate people, doing press. It's pretty variable, and that keeps it fun. I mean, for me, the reason I'm still doing this, and the reason a lot of us are still doing this, is that we really enjoy working with each other. I mean, sitting in meetings and building stuff with Robin or John Cook or Ice Frog, is a blast. I mean, it's like playing a game except on steroids. So, any chance that I get to sit down and actually do work with people is super motivating.
Do you ever take a minute to kind of think back and look at the impact that Valve has had, this company that you co-founded, has had on the entire industry?
Why do they have motivational music in this?
That's really not how we think, right? I mean, it's not sort of. We're always concerned about what we need to do next and how we're evolving and what are the new challenges. So we don't spend a lot of time, we do postmortems and an analysis, but it's always perspective. Okay, so how does that change?
Because IGN.
So I'll spend time thinking about Artifact and why Artifact ended up being a disappointment. And that's actually way more useful than thinking about the impact we had on the industry. Like,
Yeah.
one is likely to help us make better decisions in the future, and the other is
Useless.
less useful.
So even though the future is more enticing and the focus, I have a rare chance to sit down with you. So we'll go back to the past for a couple minutes.
Oh no.
Is it fair to say that you started Valve because you loved Doom and Quake
Oh, absolutely.
versus just working on Windows all day?
So I mean so I was working on Windows, and there was this war that was going on that doesn't even make sense nowadays, where people would say stuff like, well, you can never get real video games to run under these operating systems because games need to go to the bare metal.
Right.
Which is like a statement that most people won't even understand what they're talking about.
Most people don't even remember DOS at this
Right.
point.
And I was like, no, we actually spend a lot of time on these systems, and because they're shared, we can over-invest more than any individual developer, so they're actually really fast. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to go find the most technically demanding PC video game and get it running under Windows, which is, you look around and it's like Doom was at the time was clearly head and shoulders above anything else. And I was like, okay, so I'll go talk to these guys. There was a Microsoft developer, a guy by the name of Michael Abrash, who'd gone to id. And so, we started working with them, and there was a system called WinG, which was a precursor to DirectX. And so we got Doom up and running under Windows using, Chris Hecker was the developer, using WinG. And I was like, wow, this is great. So I spent a bunch of time working on that, and I was like, this is a lot of fun. And Abrash, who was working with Carmack and Romero and those guys, said, you'd have a lot more fun doing a video game company than working on Windows. So I had this whole elaborate thinking about why it was a smart business decision, but the reality was it was an awesome excuse to sit around all day and play Quake.
And it turned out to be it's like an all-time bet on yourself move, because you took your Microsoft money and self-funded
Yep.
Half-Life 1.
And I think you probably understand why we think that that's we're still a privately held company, and the reason for that is, in economics, there's this term called agency problems. We want as few people between us and the people who are consuming our product as we
Right.
possibly can. And when you start taking outside financing, those are often the people who are going to be perturbing your decisions in ways that sometimes are helpful and sometimes are, the death of your company.
Yeah.
So it seemed to make a lot of sense to take as little external funding as we
Blizzard.
did. And the small amount of external funding we did take was from the publisher, and that ended up creating a bunch of headaches for us down the road that took us a long time to get sorted out. And that just sort of reinforced this notion that, putting us, having really clear understandings of.
I wonder what they would have done though without
how you
Dota
want
2.
to give them tools, how you're not trying to act as a
What would they have
proxy
done?
for the customer.
Say they never made Dota
For the
2.
people who are, for example, using Steam, you're just like,
How would they
we're
look
just
like
gonna
today?
build tools that are useful to you. We're not going to try to start interpreting or defining or manipulating the decisions you're making.
Dota 3.
But yeah, so
Half-Life 3. I know
I
that's
got to
CSGO,
work with
but
these guys,
Dota
and
2
I can't
is
imagine
like,
what would be a better
I don't know
way to
how
spend the last
exactly
couple of
the
decades.
multiplayer
Do you still
compared to
do you still keep
Counter-Strike,
in touch with your
but it's a
co-founder,
lot
Mike
more money
Harrington?
for them.
Yeah. We see
A
each
lot
other
more money.
periodically. Yep, he just he had some he's really big into mountain climbing, and I'm really big into not mountain climbing. I'm the best not mountain climbing person you will ever meet. And he developed some respiratory problems in one of his last climbs, which kind of is putting an end to his mountain climbing. So he and I got together and we're talking about that.
You touched on this a minute ago, but what still drives and motivates you after all
Steam
this
gives
time?
more money,
I mean, there's
Yes,
a lot of
very
it's,
true.
It's
but
it's
I was wondering
fun
what
to
game
do
they would
what
have
we
made,
do.
as a game company.
Video game development is a lot of
Instead
fun.
of Dota.
Seeing what comes out, seeing how the technology is advancing, and working with the people I get to work with, right? I mean,
Yeah.
working with Eric Wolpaw on doing insurance company
Artifact
auditing
earlier.
software would be hysterically fun.
Actually, maybe Artifact would have come
I
out
wanna-
earlier.
I wanna go
Probably.
do startup
Start
with
doing that, yeah.
right. So yeah, it's great, and the opportunities that are in front of us are even more exciting and interesting than they've ever been. It's like, with Half-Life 2, we achieved stuff, and then we sort of looked at the episodic content side and got through 2 episodes there, and then we realized, well, this really is more going to work better for the sort of emerging notion of what a connected economy is going to look like in a multiplayer environment. So it's exciting now that we have something like VR where we say, oh, we feel really strongly that this is going to give us some exciting opportunities. And like I was saying earlier, the brain-computer interface stuff is, we're way closer to the Matrix than people realize, right? It's not going to be the Matrix. The Matrix is, a movie, and it misses all the interesting technical subtleties and just how weird that the post-brain computer interface world is going to be. But it's going to have huge impact
Spoilers.
on the kinds of experiences that we can create for people. And so, like what we're doing right now is
Well, the
super
Zoomers
exciting.
haven't seen it yet.
To be able to do it with people that I get to do it with is a blast. I can't wait to see what the fans have to say after they have a chance to play Alyx, and the future looks super exciting.
Are
as well.
are you with Elon Musk on the we need to merge with the AI to prevent it from killing us all, or are you which side of the fence do you fall on?
am I listening
I think it's going to be really complicated. It'd be
Nice
like trying
question.
to describe the internet to somebody who'd never used the internet before.
Yeah.
People don't realize how the ideas of what we would do with the internet. It's like, oh, it's a great way to get cooking recipes, or was complete. As opposed to nobody would have predicted something like Uber occurring, right? And yet Uber is super valuable. It wouldn't have occurred to people that we'd be getting updates over the internet to our cars.
True.
So that would end up being a super valuable feature. So I think it's one of those things where we're going to learn a lot as we progress. There'll be some things that turn out to be ridiculously hard, and other things that'll turn out to be ridiculously easy. Like, I think connecting to people's motor cortex and visual cortex is going to be way easier than people expected, and doing things like, okay, you really want to go down the rabbit hole?
For a few minutes, why
Okay.
not? I mean, we don't get to talk to you very often. So
Reading and
you're
writing-
clearly passionate about
Reading
it.
and writing to somebody's motor cortex is much more of a tractable problem than making people feel cold. And you never would have guessed that, right? I never would have guessed that
Yeah.
until going into it.
Just have
And it
a
turns
fan.
out that your brain has
blowing.
really good interfaces for some things and really badly
Right at you.
designed kludgy interfaces. for
Or
doing other
put your
things.
shit on in a
And the fact
freezer.
that your immune system gets involved in your perceptions of temperature means there are all sorts of weird parts of your brain that participate in the sensation of being cold, right? Whereas things like your motor cortex or your visual cortex are much more tractable problems.
Very interesting.
And that's what I mean by, like, we're going to learn a lot as we proceed as to what things work and what things don't, what things are valuable to people, and what things are just party tricks that don't really matter in the long run.
And do you see a gaming tie-in to that, or is it a whole separate sort of concern for you? Not concern, interest.
No, I think that it's an extinction level event for every entertainment form that's not thinking about this. It's gonna change. If you're in the entertainment business and you're not thinking about this, you're gonna be thinking about it a lot more in the future, right?
What was your favorite game of last year? Besides, I know you play a lot of Dota 2, but maybe outside the company.
All right, Gabe and I are going to have a fight now in front of you.
Good, yeah, this is good video. This is good content here. My bosses will be
If
happy.
you want me, I can give you his answer.
Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, here we go.
His answer is, I don't understand why I would play any game other than Dota 2 at this point. Like, I'm just going to keep playing Dota 2.
Sound like a couple of my coworkers.
Yeah.
That's-
And my
Sell
answer
outs.
is like, oh my god, there are so many amazing games out now, and I'm really sad for you that you can't enjoy anything other than Dota 2.
I played Orwell. I liked Orwell, and I played what's the card game?
Slay the
Artifact.
No, not that one. That
Oh,
one.
you're wrong, man. You should have.
I did play Slay the Spire.
Okay.
I was not quite as obsessed with
Because-
Slay the Spire
So,
as you
yeah,
were.
like,
So
When
I also played Bloons.
When you brought in, what was sort of your thinking? How did the Campo Santo acquisition come about? Because they're such an interesting creative group. I know them reasonably well since they were right in San Francisco with us. And
So for us, acquisitions are not financially driven and they're not IP driven. They're people driven.
Why are you
For
showing
exactly the
Firewatch
same
right now?
reasons you liked them, we liked them. It was like, we like these guys. We like how they think. We would, like, working on games.
What
is
was
like
question?
being married.
I missed
you're
it.
do
They
I
bought
wanna
the
spend,
studio.
40, 60, 80 hours a week,
Historically,
I like
we've
Firewatch.
hired a lot of people out of the mod community.
I don't know what other
had
games
a
they
really good
made.
experience doing that.
yeah,
Especially personally, I had a really good experience doing it. And
he says as a modder.
that's right. And then, that's right. A bunch of Half-Life tweakers.
Only this.
And then over time, as the sort of, I think the rise of the indie studio meant that a bunch of people who in the past, you didn't quite have the capabilities to build a full game, but you had a lot of interesting game design ideas, you built upon some other technology. You saw the rise of technologies that were easily accessible for lots of other people. And so people who I think we would have thought of them as mod makers before, became indie developers in their own rights and built their own amazing games. And so for a while there, we sort of said to ourselves, we should be paying more attention to the indie studios out there. They're doing all this really interesting stuff. And that just led to us trying to spend more time chatting to them and looking for the same sort of thing we were looking for in mod makers, which is people that we really liked and wanted to work with, who had built something interesting. And Campo were absolutely.
And now they're helping you finish off a Half-Life game.
it's
So
been
go figure.
awesome.
That worked out pretty well.
Half-Bath game.
Yeah, they are awesome, and I think that's one of the things I find really exciting about Alyx is this blend of experience on Valve's side
like
of
this
a bunch of
sentence.
people who've worked on all the way back to our first Half-Life one, and their sort of thoughts about how we sort of push narrative into the experience of playing the game,
And
combined.
Thank you for the 4 years, Capizzi. Doing a badge.
Just gonna continue
The
on.
boomer. The
And then you
Fonz,
marry
Charlie
it with
Adams,
that
and
this
Maruru.
people
Welcome
from
back.
Campo Santo who
Charlie
have,
Adams,
I
2
think,
years.
in their
Thank you.
experience with Firewatch
Hi.
have a slightly different approach that was in a lot of ways fed by their experiences with some of the older narrative forms.
Yeah.
And so Alyx ends up with this mix of, I think, both very novel and new and old thoughts about how we tell narrative sort of in the experience, and I think it's turned out really well. I think there's a lot more narrative in Half-Life Alyx than in any of our previous Half-Life games. And a lot more of the sort of dynamic narrative that I think they started doing in Firewatch so well, and so I'm really excited to see how people respond to that.
Gabe, you've not been shy in the past about commenting on what Sony and Microsoft are up to on the console side or service side. Now that we've got 2 new consoles coming this fall, are you looking at those at all? Do you see anything there you like or don't like?
Those issues seem to be sort of kind of less
He doesn't give a fuck
relevant. I mean, it used to
about
be that
consoles.
supporting the consoles or supporting PCs or supporting mobiles were much more of a percent of the total development budget. So those decisions would have bigger impacts on how the industry collectively was investing in terms of the future. I think that's less important now. I think that they're just sort of delivery sockets for the people's entertainment experiences. So, I think that's nice. It's certainly it's good for developers that they're having to make fewer bets that are out of their control in terms of what those things are. But they're all sort of everything.
Made a
sort of
console
converging
3 years
around
ago.
Shut the fuck up when I talk,
similar
man.
underlying
One more time and
CPU
you're banned
designs
from
and
Steam.
GPU designs with layers on top of it. So if you're a software developer, you just don't have to worry about it. It's like, well, it'll work on all of them.
Right. So it's a roundabout way of basically saying they're becoming more and more of just PCs.
Right.
Yeah, that's fair to say. Source 2.0, is that something you think you guys will license out as you have in the past with Source?
Yeah. I think that there's a bunch of useful work that had to get done in order for Alyx to ship, and I think that if developers think that that's useful, then that's going to be great.
Whoa. What map is
So we'll
this?
see. I mean, we're going to do some work there to see what sort of, if people come back and say, hey, that's great and all, but you're not really solving any of the real problems that we as a development organization have. that'll tell us one thing. But if people come back and say, actually, this is pretty useful, could you do
It's an
X?
April Fool's
Then we'll
joke.
continue to invest on that sort of.
I
It's
was
really
being
going to be driven
sarcastic,
by
first
what
of all.
people tell us in terms of the value of the current version of the engine and related technology. But I think this is going to be pretty useful for a lot of people.
I know I've just got a few more minutes here with you. I'm going to take the opportunity and ask you to pick a favorite child: Half-Life 1 or Half-Life 2.
What do you think?
Portal 2.
It's an acceptable answer.
Yeah. I worked less on Portal 2 than I. So if there's this problem that when you work on games,
Wait, he's not trolling?
you must have the same experience when you're working on a piece. Like everything is abandoned in the end, right?
I think you misheard the
it's a collection
question.
of flaws and regrets and mistakes
Under a deadline.
under a deadline, and so that's how when people ask me about those things, I don't
It didn't?
remember the.
Didn't it say, what's your favorite one? Half-Life 1 or Half-Life 2? And then he said, Portal 2.
Products. I remember all of the like Zen. Like I'll be on my deathbed. I'll be like, damn it! If only we'd had another 6 months. And that's how I feel about those. So Portal 2, which I worked on less, it's like much easier for me to appreciate as, oh wow, that's pretty good. Good job, guys.
Also happens to be a great game unto its own right, conveniently. So
Alyx is the best, though.
No, definitely.
No, I mean, not jocularly. It's actually...
There's a bunch of things that we got to do and spend more time on, and stew on and fix.
Yeah.
We went all the way back to Half-Life 1 for some things and said, you know what, I think we did this a little better than we did in Half-Life 2. And we went back and spent a bunch of time looking at that and tried to understand why that got worse. Game development's like that. You can build something you think is on paper just has to be better, and then when you put it in front of players, it's less fun and you can't quite understand exactly why, and you've got to spend some time pulling that apart. And so it was fun to be able to go back and sort of cherry pick from both those products and the episodes and say, let's take this bit and that bit.
I guess I imagine in that regard.
Hey, Anonymous, thank you for the
time
5 gifted
between
subs, dude.
Episode 2
Appreciate it.
and Alyx.
Congratulations
was
to the winners.
Maybe helpful in that way, in that it gave you no. That's it. All right. No. Okay.
It's a new sentence.
Well, for what you're talking about, I don't know. This is why I just ask questions,
we got a
and
lot
you.
of time to stew on it. I
Yeah.
didn't really think about that, and we got a lot.
You had a lot of time to
feedback.
think about
But
it.
the reality is that people who worked on those
What is
previous
this?
games have developed
This is an
a lot.
interview.
They're just a lot better.
Yeah,
at
I
what we do.
completely agree. Yeah, and we got to put them next to a ton of other people who have a lot of other experiences, and sort of combine all that. I think that was exciting. It's funny, when I think back on our old games, the bit I remember is less about the game and more about moments during development, like periods of time where we worked on a problem with a set of people or something. Those stick in my head as the bits I remember most.
Yeah, it's like, and nobody outside the company would be like, oh, Gabe said, remember when he brought in all the Wonder Bread and lunch meat and said, let's have it? And everybody's like, you're insane. It's like revealing your white trash roots, Gabe. Back off. No, Miracle Whip is awesome. Like, how do you turn that into a game review comment? Gabe likes Miracle Whip.
Dave?
I can't not ask this while I'm here. What is the closest we've ever gotten to a Half-Life 3 without saying Half-Life Alyx?
What?
Dude.
No.
It's the closest.
He's so mad.
It's part of a progression, right? I mean, for us, it
Yeah.
really is about Half-Life games are supposed to solve interesting problems, and Alyx represents the collection of interesting problems and solutions that we can use. Like the big gap really is because maybe we're stupid, but it didn't seem like there was an obvious, like we don't just crank Half-Life titles out
Thankfully not.
because it helps us make the quarterly numbers, right? It's we deliberately avoid imposing that constraint on how we approach stuff, and we could be right and we could be wrong. We make mistakes, and we did Steam machines. We did, Artifact was a giant disappointment. We screw things up. And so for us, this is actually a really powerful moment for us, because this is as good as we get, right? Alyx, and we want to find out, like, are we on the right track? Like, we want people to come back and say, oh my God, the magic still is there. These guys at Valve can take this kind of experience and build something that opens our eyes as designers, that thrills us as players, that reviewers look at and say, no, this is legit. And if it's not, then that's also going to be super powerful and super useful for us. I think we've nailed it. But for us, all the we've gnawed on this thing for a long time. It is time for it to go out into the real world. And, it's like, you're sending your kid off to college.
Yeah.
Like, let's see what happens. And that for us is incredibly important and part of our development, right? This is how everybody reacts to it is going to tell us what the next generation of changes and improvements we're going to make. So, unfortunately, failure is more
So if everyone says they like it, then you're gonna make Half-Life 3.
Just a couple
That's what it's
more
saying.
real quick. I asked this totally respectfully, like it's this position that you've earned your way into. So I don't ask it flippantly, but like, does it even matter how well Alyx sells, how well it does, or is it
how it does is incredibly important. I mean, the VR market obviously is constrained.
You just said it's
We're not,
important.
expecting, it's constrained in terms of the
This
number of
interviewer
devices that
has-
are out there
Yeah.
in the
Retarded.
world. So for us, it's much more about what do the fans say, what do the reviewers say, what do other developers tell us about their reactions to it. There's going to be a consensus that emerges. It matters a huge amount to us, right? Because to us, this is how we figure out: are we on the right track? Are we moving in the direction that we need to, right? And that's great. So it matters incredibly. It's going to affect every conversation we have internally for the next 18 months. Will be a reference to, what worked and what didn't work on the release of Alyx.
And then finally, I'm definitely curious, what does the next 10 years of this place look like, of Valve? What are your goals and hopes for the next decade?
Go ahead.
I don't know. I want
More
definitely
games.
want to make more Half-Life. It's been really fun working on this.
Mohawk Life.
Turned out
Oh
amazing.
man, I can't wait for Mohawk Life.
We're sort of as tooled up around that as we have been in a long time.
That's my favorite franchise.
I really want to get to the point where some of the stuff Gabe's talking about starts to really impact us. I get to spend more time thinking about that on the game design side. I think that stuff's really exciting. And, sort of mind expanding in terms of potential around that. So,
I don't know. For me, it's just the lazy technological answer around brain-computer interfaces. I mean, as a company, it's a lot of fun to work here, right? I feel like we're productive. We're continuing to grow. We have the right recipe, I think, for the long run in terms of it being a great place for people to work, which is the core to the design of the company. I think we need to crack. I think Index is a great step forward in terms of us developing as people who can use the hardware stack as part of our design palette, and I think we really need to move harder, on that. And now that we can do it, now we need to exploit it.
Do it well.
And brain-computer interface.
Love it. Gabe, Robin, thank you very much. For more on all things Half-Life Alyx, keep it tuned right here to IGN.
Very unexpected ending. Not. But yeah, I don't have, for the guy asking if I have an index, I don't have an index, and I'm not gonna get one for Half-Life Alyx. I'll get one when I feel like they solved the sickness and all those issues, because I get very sick easily. From VR. I have the other VR that they made, but I'm not using it anymore.